Hey guys, today we're going to talk about 3D printers and all of the things that you need to know about these guys. So let's jump right into it. In Intro Engineering, you're going to be using 3D printers to learn about how to design things, how to make prototypes, and how to solve problems. Sometimes we'll be using 3D printers to help to develop our 3D modeling skills, and sometimes they'll just be a tool that we'll need as we are solving a problem for a specific project. In this class, you're going to be using a couple of different kinds of 3D printers.
This is a Creality Ender 3 S1 Pro. I know, it's a mouthful. These are what most of the 3D printers in the lab are. This is an Ender 3 Pro, and there are two of these guys in our lab. These are older model 3D printers, but they work just fine. And they're just a little bit different than the newer ones, and we'll discuss that in a minute. This is an Ender 3 V2. This is kind of in between an Ender 3 Pro and an Ender 3 S1 Pro. This is a Dremel 3D 45. These are kind of the easiest 3D printers to work with in our lab. They're designed for educational use. This is a CR10. This is the big guy. You probably won't use this very much, but if you do, this is the biggest 3D printer that we have in the lab. It can make the biggest objects. This is an FL Sun Super Racer. Now this is a kind of a weird looking 3D printer, but this 3D printer is designed to be fast. So if we need a part and we just need to know whether it works or not and we don't care how it looks, this printer can crank out a 3D print in about half of the time as any other printer in the lab. And last but not least, these are our resin printers. Resin printers work very differently than the other printers in the lab. These actually use a liquid filament instead of using a plastic hard filament that gets melted. This liquid filament actually uses ultraviolet radiation to form, and it prints upside down. So you can see here that this build plate is actually facing down, and as the print finishes, it actually goes up. You probably won't be handling these very much because there is some danger involved with these, but if we ever needed to print something that was very detailed or had a lot of surface features that were hard to do with traditional 3D printing, we might use these. Okay, so we are back at the Ender 3 V2 so that we can talk about some of the parts on this thing. I expect all of my students to be able to identify the basic parts of a 3D printer. So, the Ender 3 V2 has one very important part that we'll talk about first, and that is the hot end, which is this guy right here. Let's take a closer look. The hot end of a 3D printer has a couple of important parts. The first thing that you'll see is that we have this plastic tube that goes in the top up here. This is where the filament comes into the printer, this blue line right here. This carries the filament all the way in from this line up here. The plastic comes in through that blue line and it goes in through, there's a fan in the way, but there's behind this is where the printer gets hot. That's why we call it the hot end. And down here at the bottom, there is the nozzle of the printer, which you can see that little gold thing right there. These fans that are on the sides, right here and right here, these cool the plastic after they melt so that it hardens in place. The other important part on some of these 3D printers is back here. You'll see this blue knob. This is called the extruder. This is a motor that pushes the filament through the 3D printer all the way to the hot end so that it can get hot and melt on the print bed. This part down here is called the print bed. The print bed for almost all of our 3D printers can move back and forth like this. This is our y-axis. The x-axis moves back and forth like this, and then the z-axis moves up and down. And if you look on the back of the printer, you can actually see that there is a very long threaded screw that drives the z-axis. So the three most important parts of a 3D printer are the extruder, the hot end, and the bed. Most of our 3D printers also come with this. This is called a bed leveling sensor. The specific one is called a CR Touch. Most of the printers in the lab have one of these. If they don't, you'll have to follow a specific set of instructions to get bed leveling down. But these will make your life a lot easier because you won't have to fiddle with these knobs as much. By the way, don't touch these knobs. Most of you, however, will be dealing with an Ender 3 S1 Pro. These guys have a couple of neat tricks. The first thing that you'll notice is that there's no extruder on the left side of the printer. There's nothing there. The extruder is actually on the hot end. This is called a direct drive extruder, where the hot end and the extruder are both put together in the same place. You can actually see that this part right here is the motor for the extruder, that silver part. So the nozzle is down there doing its thing. There's a fan cooling the part. That's what that silver part is. And you can see that our Ender 3 S1 Pros also come with their CR Touch. The only other things that these have that the others may or may not have is that this has a runout sensor, which tells us if our printer runs out of filament, and these guys also have a really dumb light. We will probably not use this light. Please don't turn it on unless I tell you that you can. Okay, so if you end up using one of the 3D45s, it's a little bit different. This is called a Core XY 3D printer. So you can see that the Z-axis is way back there in the back. These give stability, and this is the lead screw that drives it up and back and forth in a motor that lives way down in here. We also have our X-axis motion here, and our Y-axis is actually a little bit hidden, but it is back there. So on this printer, the bed is really fixed in place, and the extruder and hot end, because this is direct drive, they both move on their own. They do most of the motion while the bed is stationary.
So that's pretty much everything that you need to know about the terminology of a 3D printer. As we continue to work through 3D printing in this class, you'll learn things along the way. One of the best ways to learn the 3D printing is just to make stuff. As a student in this class, you're going to be assigned a 3D printer, and if there's a problem with that 3D printer during class, you're the one that gets to fix it. Most of the times, those fixes are going to be pretty simple. It could be as simple as replacing the nozzle, cleaning the nozzle out with a tiny little needle, or maybe even replacing one of the PTFE tubes if it's one of the non-direct drive 3D printers like the old ones. 3D printers take a lot of practice and experience, and one of the great things about being in this class is that you get your own 3D printer that you will be assigned, that you will be responsible for. So I would encourage you to practice those 3D modeling skills so that you can make your creations come to life in this class. In a future video, we'll do some tutorials on how to do some basic maintenance on each of these printers, so be on the lookout for that in the future. I'll see you in the next video.